Joel Peterson, it is such an honor to have you on 20 Minute Leaders. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be with you, Michael.
All right, so just to get started, because this is just way too impressive, I'm just going to give a very quick rundown of some of the things that you've done so that we can start guiding the conversation. You were the CEO of back then the world's largest private commercial real estate development firm. You founded Peterson Partners with over $1 billion under management, GSB professor for many years, chairman of the board of JetBlue Airways, father of seven, grandfather of 25, and all during all of this time, you also launched a book on leadership. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it makes me tired to hear it.
Teach me your ways. I'm a young entrepreneur just starting my path. I told you one day I hope to be able to sit in your GSB class as a student myself. How did this happen? How do you get to where you are?
You put one foot in front of the next, and you take opportunities. And you have goals, and I remember I wrote down 10 goals that I had when I was in college, and I posted them on my mirror, and I had to look at them every day when I shaved, and it reminded me to work towards them. And in the end, I achieved 9 of them.
Really?
Yeah, and they were kind of hard to achieve goals. So I really got an appreciation for the power of setting goals and writing them down. I always tell my students now, always have goals, but write them in pencil so they don't become your taskmaster. Things change in life.
I
You
love
want to
that.
adjust your goals, but you should always be working towards something.
I love the writing and pencil part. That's really really nice. So you exemplify what a leader is, and you exert leadership in all sorts of different ventures that you do, from investments to the classroom to being on the board of a huge company. Talk to me a little bit about leadership and how do you find the balance between putting on these different hats on all these different ventures?
Well, I guess I've always been in leadership roles ever since being captain of the safety patrol and a student body president. And, I've always liked the process of helping people uh, get to an objective. And what I've learned over time is if you can help people get where they want to go, but might not get there without you, that's a really meaningful thing. I think it's hard to drive people where you want them to go. But I think if you can attract people who want to go to the same place that you'd like to go and remove obstacles, provide incentives, get the right people belayed to each other, you can climb really high peaks.
And you do that while you're going alongside making friends, forming relationships, which I'm sure also come in handy throughout your whole life.
Well, you've got to do that. Business is a team sport, family is a team sport, and you want to have the comedy that exists among people who like and trust each other.
Definitely. So tell me a little bit about this new book. So you're writing about entrepreneurial leadership. What does that even mean?
So I've taught a leadership course and an entrepreneurship course at Stanford, and I've observed that many organizations are led by presiders. Some are led by politicians. Some are led by managers. Some are led by administrators, and some are led by entrepreneurs,
Right.
pure entrepreneurs who know how to light fires, but may not know how to manage them or take them to the next level. So I've really identified this class of leaders who are really entrepreneurial leaders. They make durable change. So they're able to make things happen quickly and it sticks. Other people can manage it and they can build teams and they do a bunch of things that really create valuable long term success. And that's really what I'd like to see more of.
Interesting. And it seems that you can't possibly be at so many places at the same time. And I'm sure a big part of your work is also delegating some of the responsibilities as you go along to new leadership and put your trust in new people. How do you go? What is the process that you go about in doing that? How do you form this trust? And how do you slowly put yourself away from this leadership position and put the trust in others?
Well, let me just back up and say that what I tried to do is figure out what are the piers that you need to drill to get to bedrock. If you're going to erect this edifice that's a durable enterprise, it has to sit on a solid foundation. And the first pier is this pier of trust. You have to be trustworthy and you have to build a high trust culture. The second thing you have to do is you have to have a clarity about which peak you're climbing. What is your mission? Do we all agree that we're climbing the same peak and we're provisioned and everything? So that clarity around mission is the second thing that you have to do, which, by the way, is not that easy. You have to think a lot about it.
I'm sure.
The third thing then is the one that you're mentioning, which is getting a team together. And that means sourcing the right people, interviewing them, doing due diligence, onboarding them, evaluating them, coaching them, promoting them, demoting them, and eventually the ones that just are in the wrong place, removing them. You've got to ensure that you've got the right team on the field at all times. So that's the third thing that you do. And then finally, if you've done all those things really well, you're ready to execute. So in this book, I try to give people a series of checklists and mindsets and ways to go about the most common things that entrepreneurs run into. How do you run meetings? How do you negotiate? How
Right.
do you sell? How do you deal with adversity? How do you manage growth? These are the very common things that every entrepreneurial leader and really every leader has to do. It's just that I think in today's world, it's going to be tough to be a pure presider or a pure politician. I think you're going to have to draw on all of these things, which in the book I call being a five tool player.
Interesting, interesting, and it can't help but face the fact that right now leadership is drastically changing. I think due to COVID-19, and there are new challenges that every leader, whether it's a CEO or a politician or an educator, that they face. How do you see this change, and what are some of the different priorities that we might have now that we didn't necessarily have, 3 months ago?
Well, I think the facts in the world have changed a lot. I think we don't know a lot of things. We're still pawing around in the dark. We're not sure that we've got the denominator right. In fact, we're pretty sure that the denominator is wrong, and it looks like the numerator may not be right. And so we
Right,
don't know if we have the right policy. You have to take action, and we have taken action, and then you have to adjust. And when you make changes, there's no recrimination, no blame. You have to keep moving forward. You have to be optimistic. So I think the leader is going to have to reimagine their business, reimagine what it is they're trying to do. They've got a covenant with investors, suppliers, customers, communities, and they have to emerge with a brand. They will emerge with a brand. And so what brand do they want to emerge with? And so I think that takes some entrepreneurial thinking and leadership. But I actually think the process is the same in good times and bad times. In order to be a great leader, you really have to think about what are the facts on the ground? How do we collect them? How do we make decisions before we have perfect information? You wait
right.
until you have perfect information, you've made a decision, and it's often not a good one.
Definitely, and so you can't ignore the fact that you're the chairman of the board of JetBlue Airways, and the travel industry has been taking a pretty hard hit, perhaps one of the hardest hits out of any industry.
For
So,
sure.
how do you approach the situation as a leader who's obviously have to run to continue helping lead this company to success, but you also have thousands of people that are looking up to you and asking, "What now? What do we do?" So, how do you even approach a situation like that?
Well, job one is survival, and survival is derivative of having enough liquidity. You're out of cash, you're out of business. So you've got to make sure you do that. And I think it's a little bit like trust. If you say all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we have to develop trust, you've waited too long.
Right.
Trust builds up a conversation at a time, a layer at a time, and it takes time to build that. The same thing with building your balance sheet. So I think you have to do that as best you can. Now, nobody has enough cash in a capital intensive business like the airline business
Right.
to survive months and months of really no flyers. So I think you have to, and part of the way that we're um, gathering cash is with help from the government. So we've got
Yep.
to make sure that we can continue to provide jobs,
Right.
not furlough our employees. And so we're doing all of those kinds of things. But then I think you have to be really transparent with people. You have to confront reality. You have to describe it fairly. People will resent being fooled. They'll resent if you don't tell them the truth. So I think you have to continue to do that. Then you have to think about your brand. What is it that you provide your customers? And you're going to emerge with a brand. And
Yes.
so, how you behave during this time, for example, at JetBlue, our number one value is safety. So now there's a new layer that's been added to this. It's health safety. So we need to make sure that our passengers are in a safe place.
Right.
That may mean taking temperatures, wearing masks, not putting anybody in the middle seat. Um, Already, one thing people don't really realize is that the air on an airplane is probably cleaner than it is anyplace else in the
Yeah.
world. The filtering systems are great. People think, gosh, I'm going into this metal tube with,
Yep.
another 100 people that can't be clean, but it's actually filtered very aggressively. So that's probably one of the better places to be.
Definitely. Joel, you've seen countless of entrepreneurs, successful and unsuccessful, both from the GSB, but also from your hundreds of investments through Peterson Partners. Give me some of your earned secrets when you're seeing an entrepreneur in front of you. What are some of the key things that you observe that you think this is somebody that he or she will be successful in 5, 10 years as they climb this uphill battle and trying to change whatever they want to change?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you are involved in the venture business, that's really all you have to evaluate.
Right.
If you're making private equity investments, you can evaluate customer lists, you can analyze balance sheet, EBITDA, a whole bunch of things. But when you're making venture investments, you're really evaluating an idea and a human being
Yep.
and their character. So I would say that those people tend to be able to see around corners. They have a bit of a vision. They're kind of pure entrepreneurs. They see things that others don't see, and they see it before. They're quite sensitized to the market and to competitive forces, and they just have a bunch of insight there. So I'd say that's one of the things that they really do well. Another is that they typically develop really high trust relationships with people because they have to, in order to raise capital, get people to supply them. In some cases, they're borrowing others' brands to build
Yep.
their own.
Sure.
So there's a lot of things they have to do that really are highly dependent on trust. And I think one of the things that most of them have, I think virtually all of them have that we've backed, is they have persistence. They don't give up. They're just not quitters. They adjust. They admit mistakes. They're vulnerable, but they don't quit.
How do you measure that though when somebody comes to you for a seed or Series A even, let's say a new entrepreneur, and you don't really have much data to give evidence that this entrepreneur will climb past the COVID-19 crisis and will continue exerting leadership and maintain the strong brand and think of the day after. So how do you, what is the process that you go through perhaps with yourself to try and evaluate this new entrepreneur, let's say that I'm coming to you and pitching an idea?
The best thing is an in-depth interview, due diligence, asking questions, looking at every time that they made a change in course and why they did, what their thinking was. People who tend to be winners, who tend to succeed, like to continue to succeed. And
Right.
so people who figured out how to do that love that pattern, and they don't all of a sudden say, "Oh, I'd like to fail today. That'd be fun. I'd like that experience." So I think if you have a pattern of success, a pattern of figuring things out, a pattern of changing when they need to change, and why they did it, they weren't running away from things. I always like people who are running towards something better than those who are running away from something.
Yeah.
Uh, so I tend to listen to all those kinds of things. And then I think one of the things that's underestimated is, do I like them? Are they likable people? Likable people tend to do better than people that are just difficult.
Yep.
And so likability, I think, is an underrated characteristic.
Fascinating. Joel, you've seen, you've climbed the ladder on so many different industries. From real estate to venture capital to now travel. How do you go about becoming an expert in these industries? Because you are a world leader in each of these, and you have to have some sort of expertise to come with to be able to be a good leader there. So how do you get yourself up to speed on all the bits and pieces and really the high level thinking of strategy of where this industry perhaps is headed?
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider myself an expert, a deep expert in any of these areas, but I am pretty good at assessing people and bringing on teams. I believe business is a team sport. And if you
Yeah.
can assemble a world class team and empower them, give them the ability to make decisions and execute on them, you can nudge, you can remove obstacles, you can
Right.
provide wisdom. I've seen a lot of the movies that they'll run into. And so they may not know how to deal with adversity or with a difficult board or whatever. And I know how to do that. So I think if I get the right people in place, I can apply that to many, many different industries.
Definitely. Joel, I'd like to sort of play a small mind game and think ahead maybe 10, 20 years. What are some of the biggest things you're excited about of where we're headed, whether it is in terms of leadership or in terms of the travel industry or real estate or venture capital? What are some of the most exciting things that I can look forward to as I'll be 30, 40 in the workplace?
So I think technology is going to impact every business. And so I think understanding technology, big data, is really critical. I think if you can apply that to how people get along, what people want, people have these fundamental needs that are going to be met in different ways. And I think that they all need education, schooling, healthcare.
Right.
They all want to learn. Learning is a huge need that people have, and it may come in the form of education, online books, whatever, TV, movies, and some of that's entertainment, some of it is education.
Right.
But I think thinking about all those things and seeing around corners, I wish I had the luxury of thinking I'd be around in 20 years.
Oh, I'm sure. It's not even a question, Joel. But I have to then take it one step further and say, there's so much hype and around, especially Silicon Valley, about all these consumer products and a lot of these things that people are working on. That especially in COVID times, there's a very clear distinction between essential and non-essential, right? We're trained now to be making this distinction on a daily basis. I have the privilege of being a senior associate at an early stage VC fund, and we also take very seriously this idea of, is this an essential business or is this another nice to have feature. So how do you then go about as sort of strategist and be able to differentiate what something might be nice to have or something that is essential?
Well, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, as we've seen, as governors have applied different measures
Right.
across the country. So I don't think there is a hard and fast rule. It's clear that people need food, they need transportation, they need shelter. I mean, there's certain things that are just core to life on the planet. There's others that I think are a little more subtle, and I wouldn't say that they're non-essential. It's funny when people are talking about shutting folks in. I was concerned because I wanted to come into the office to do these kinds of broadcasts, and
Right.
somebody said, "Are you going to get picked up by the police for coming in?" And so somebody checked it out for me. They said, "No, online education is essential." So I was safe from that. So at least according to one person assessing it, this is essential. What we're doing right now is essential.
Yep.
Other people might not think it is, but I think it's a good question. I don't think anybody has all the answers, other than there are certain things that are absolutely clearly essential, and other things that are frivolous and may
Interesting.
take longer to come back.
Right. Joel, before we finish, I'm a young entrepreneur. I have the unique privilege of sitting in front of you, and I have to ask you for advice for myself. So I'm starting my path now. I'm greatly enjoying my time at Stanford. I love diving into deep technology and having the tools myself. And if I look at the sort of leader that I want to be one day with the influence that I want to have, you're a perfect example of that. And that's why it's very interesting for me to hear if you could, give me any piece of advice, any single piece of advice of something that I should keep in mind as I go through this journey over the next few decades. What is the most important thing that I should remember?
You won't like this advice. Do you
I'm
still want to
ready.
hear
I'm ready.
it? So I think getting as close to the customer as you can. And in many cases, that means selling. And I know
Interesting.
people don't like to sell, but it's because they think that in selling, they're pushing product. They're like a used car salesman, and they're trying to fool people into getting something they don't really want or need. In fact, selling is solving problems. And the closer to the customer you can get, the closer you can get to understanding real issues, real problems, and coming up with creative solutions, the better able you'll be to anticipate the future market, to build products and services that meet and satisfy needs, to structure deals that make sense. So I would say to, and I say this to all my young students, and not many of them like hearing it.
That is so interesting, Joel. I can't believe 20 minutes are already up. One last question, and I'm gonna put you a little bit on the spot, so I apologize for not preparing you in advance. But I'd love to hear three words that you would best describe yourself as. And this is something that I'm asking every person that I hold these conversations with. We've done almost 100 episodes so far, and it's fascinating for me to hear how different people within different industries are thinking about themselves as part of this world. So, what are three words that you would best consider yourself as, or you would like others to consider you as?
Yeah, those are two different questions.
Choose either one.
Yeah. So I think of myself as persistent, which might be stubborn. I think of myself as kind, which might be soft. And I think of myself as focused, which might be monomaniacal. So it just depends on how you're looking at it.
Wonderful. Joel, thank you so much for this time. I can't wait to hopefully be in one of your classes one day. And I can't wait to read your new book.
Well, thank you so much. Look forward to having you in class, or at least hearing what you think about the book.
Definitely. Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.